Welcome to Cultivated Live for Tuesday, October 22nd. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media and the host of this program called Cultivated Live. And since we launched almost a year ago, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information. We do that in a couple of ways. We do that through our daily newsletter, which is called Cultivated Daily, which you can get at cultivated.news. And we do this daily live stream, which is called Cultivated Live. We stream through LinkedIn and YouTube, so please follow us and subscribe to us there. And most importantly, get our newsletter in your inbox. You can find it at cultivated.news. Today, we're going to have a great conversation with Steve Reilly from Insa. Steve, welcome.
Jay, thanks for having me on the program here.
Well, anytime I can have someone on from Massachusetts and talk cannabis, I will do that. That's a guarantee. So everybody listening out there, if you're in Massachusetts, you can do that. We just, before we came on, we're talking Massachusetts. We're talking about people in common. And of course, because it's Massachusetts, it's like we knew the same people in common, which I do love. And I will shout out, you can't really see it, but you're wearing a Salem hat, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
And 'tis the season to be in Salem, Massachusetts to do all things spooky and witches. So welcome.
Yeah, no, we saved everybody the Massachusetts go around the state, but it was fun chatting with you about that.
We didn't get to lament about the Red Sox. We didn't talk about the Bruins' upcoming season. We didn't lament about the Patriots. There's a lot we could have talked about, but we didn't. We'll spare everybody that, and that the fact that the Yankees are in the World Series is devastating. But Steve, we're not talking about those things. We're talking about cannabis. We're going to get to Florida because I think that's an important conversation we want to sort of get to with 2 weeks left in the campaign from today. But give us a little bit of background about you, Insa, the footprint, and sort of how big and growing you are.
Yeah, so we started Insa in Massachusetts is probably about 11 years ago. My partners, Pat and Pete, had this idea to get into a business together and like the opportunities in cannabis and had a passion for that. So I got involved helping them get the company off the ground. We were one of the probably more unusual ones that started in the Northeast and have kind of moved out. So we were one of the first licensees in Massachusetts, both medically and then also adult use. And we've maximized our footprint here in the state to what we're able to do under the licensing. And we've been able to expand the business outside Massachusetts through some of the success we've had here. And we've gone into states like Connecticut, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So we currently operate in 5 states. I know we're going to focus a lot on Florida. But it's been something very fun, and we've been in it for quite a while. This has been about 11 years. Personally, myself, before I got involved in Insa, I was really like a licensing and municipal attorney. So I did licensing work for the city of Springfield, town of Wilbraham. It represented municipalities, as well as private practice clients, and did things in areas like entertainment licensing, liquor licensing, gaming. I actually worked for the Mass Gaming Commission for a period of time. And then in addition to that kind of legal stuff, I had always been involved in politics, either running campaigns, being kind of involved in campaigns at multiple levels, pretty much at almost any office, for the most part, governor, the U.S. Senate, minimally House of Representatives or Congress, and then a lot of state offices, mayoral offices, things like that. So
I knew I liked you. I'm not a lawyer, but I did work in municipal government. I did work in politics in California and campaigns up and down the ballot there. So I did know I liked you, even though I didn't know all those things before I got into it. And then I worked for heavily regulated industries, not the ones you did, but I worked for charter schools, PG&E, which was our electric company out in California, and healthcare. So it was some overlap there, which I like. But one of the things you just mentioned sort of about Insa's footprint is that Connecticut, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida, ones that are Connecticut and Ohio have just transitioned to also have adult use. Pennsylvania and Florida appear to be on the cusp, whether it happens this election cycle or this legislative session. How do you look at that? And how do you, I don't know how to place bets. You're not placing bets, but how do you think about what's happening in those states as it relates to your operations that are currently there?
I mean, the opportunity for adult use is big for us. I mean, we've got a limited market with medical, so the potential to be able to sell to more customers is really what that comes down to, the opportunity for adult use. Florida, we're going to find out pretty soon. We've got a ballot question, although it doesn't end at that ballot question because the legislature is going to have their say in terms of what this really looks like. So there's going to be like a phase two to this. Hopefully get a good result at the ballot box, but then there's going to be a lot of work to do in the legislature to kind of define what does adult use cannabis in Florida look like. Pennsylvania is a totally different animal. I'm intimately involved in Pennsylvania. We had a bill last year that we were able to get passed in the legislature called Senate Bill 773 that vertically integrated us along with a few other operators. Um, Pennsylvania is very difficult to get legislation done in because it's so split. You've got, I think, 201 members of the House, and the Democrats have a one seat majority. It's actually technically, I think there's more Republicans in the House right now because they've had some resignations. But really figure it as a one seat majority. It's very difficult to get legislation through a body like that because every member has power. If you lose one member, then you lose the whole thing. And then you've got a Senate that's controlled by Republicans, and then you've got Josh Shapiro, who's the governor. So getting legislation done is very hard there. Adult use it can be a controversial issue. And right now, what we're paying attention to in Pennsylvania is more what's the election going to mean for control of the House of Representatives there, because that will change the potential for adult use. Although I think in Pennsylvania, I haven't been that optimistic about an adult use bill passing really up until now. I just don't see it as a priority for them and the support. But I do think that that's going to change as we get into 2025. So paying attention to who controls the House there will probably be a good indicator in terms of what will happen with adult use and what adult use will look like. I'm optimistic that even if Republicans control the House, that they might be willing to move an adult use cannabis bill so that it can look the way that they want it to look. I don't know who's going to control the House in Pennsylvania. Anybody you ask has a different opinion. Nobody
Maybe
knows.
two different opinions.
Nobody knows.
When you're in Pennsylvania, or talking to Pennsylvania legislators, I'm always curious. Right, you have border states: Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Maryland. Like all those states have gone legal and actually doing pretty well and attracting Pennsylvania
Mhm.
cannabis consumers out of the state now to buy cannabis. Similar in New Hampshire, going to Massachusetts. But like, does that factor in whether they're Republican or Democrats to how quickly they want to move or the pressure they feel, or is it more we're going to do what we want to do on our own timeline?
I'd say it's probably more we're going to do what we want to do on our own timeline. I mean, it's helpful to be able to say like, hey, they're taking all your, you know, all these transactions, and you're not preventing cannabis from coming into Pennsylvania. But at the end of the day, I think that they're going to want this to look the way that they want it to look. I think what you have is a Democratic Party that would really like to get this done, and a Republican Party that might be willing to let it get done, but they have different versions of or visions of what an adult use bill actually looks like.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why it's so hard to resolve in Pennsylvania because I think there's a wide gap there. But one of the things that seems to be on the horizon is going to be some budget issues. I think a lot of these states are going to have budget issues. I mean, they've been spending as if the money was never going to go back to prior
Right.
levels, and at some point there's going to have to be hard decisions made. And if it's that we need to raise more revenue, I think then it's beneficial for cannabis because that's a potential income source.
Yeah, absolutely. There was just the tax foundation just put out a how is your recreational cannabis tax, and the variation state by state is actually it's pretty incredible. I don't have to tell you, like it's in the Northeast it's relatively similar, but throughout the rest of the country it's all over the place. And I think in Missouri they actually codified it in their ballot measure, so it's actually relatively low to their neighbor in Illinois. So
Hmm.
obviously considerations for people in Pennsylvania because you have to be competitive with neighboring states because people will shop around, of course. But I want to shift to Florida, where we're 2 weeks out from Amendment 3. The latest polling, at least that was released yesterday, had it passing, although I would put any caveat on any poll this close to an election, or any poll ever, actually. And you come from politics, you're probably going to say the same thing. But how, in your view, how is the campaign going? But also, like, how big is the hurdle still to be done over the next 2 weeks?
Uh, you've worked on some of these campaigns. I've worked on them. It's not done until it's done. It's one of those things that like you just go through the basically like I don't know in sports it's like play through the whistle, and it's kind of like that. So I sort of have a mentality that you just grind it out every inch of the way until it's done, and then you can kind of say, all right, let's see what happened here. But um, there's still point being there's still a long way to go. Things can happen. We've been seeing a lot of opposition spend, which I think has been helping the opposition for sure. And I think the polls show that. So, as that continues to go, that's something we have to be concerned with and try to address it in our own messaging and through our campaign, which we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one to watch, and you can comment on any of these things or none of them after I say them. But it's interesting because you have Governor DeSantis, and I would say like the Republican Party in Florida on one side saying no on Amendment 3. You have former President Donald Trump actually saying, I'm actually going to vote yes on Amendment 3. That's carried through some parts of the Republican Party. I think the young Republicans came out and supported it. There's been some controversy. And sort of concurrent with that, you have Governor DeSantis, we wrote about it this week in the newsletter, actually pulling lots of levers of the official government of Florida to spend taxpayer money on messaging that would seem to be no on Amendment 3, right? It's been about the dangers of cannabis use in teens from the Department of Education, dangers of cannabis use in driving from the Department of Transportation. Like, those things are impossible to contend with from a yes on 3 campaign. But, like, obviously it's having an impact, you mentioned, but but also, like, it seems to have strong support. Like, that there's something there that all that spend against is still, whether you choose a poll that's sort of in the high 50s or the mid 60s, like, this does have broad support.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it does. The 60% number is the difficult number to get. I mean, if we were talking about a 50%, then it's a totally different thing. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch the public service announcements. I haven't seen that strategy employed to use taxpayer money to oppose a ballot question yet. So that's an interesting one from a number of perspectives,
Yes.
legal, political, and otherwise. So that's a new test case. I just haven't seen a governor that's been willing to spend the taxpayers' money to do that yet, and
But
we'll see how it
I'll
works.
say it so you don't have to. He's also done the same thing with one of their largest employers in Disney. Like, he's not afraid to take on, use the government levers to take on, well, business interests. Unbelievably, similarly vetoed a hemp regulation bill, which also factored into the early part of this campaign. So it's all to say a lot is happening in Florida. We will see what happens in 2 weeks. But I actually want to zoom out a little bit because Florida as a barometer, in that whether this passes or fails, I believe it's gonna get close to 60%, which I think would indicate really strong support, even in a state like Florida, or especially in a state like Florida.
Yeah.
Does that have repercussions, I guess, in Florida beyond the election, or other, I don't know, southern states, or the states that haven't gone yet? I'm thinking Pennsylvania and Texas being the next 2 big ones, or Wisconsin.
So I don't know how much it affects Pennsylvania. Say, for example, I think it affects any state that has a ballot initiative. Um, Pennsylvania doesn't, so I don't know that I don't think it does much in Pennsylvania. But in states that do, I think it does because it's a good indicator that you might be able to get support in your state for something like this.
Yeah.
Um, our campaign needs to get the way that I think about it is 60%. That'd be great. We need to get as high as possible because we still have other hurdles to pass, which I mentioned. I don't know if we mentioned it here yet, but maybe backstage we did. But the Florida legislature is going to have their hands in this if this passes. It's not as if, okay, that's it, we're done, we're going to go implement this. They're going to have their say in terms of what it looks like. And we need to, the stronger the message that the public has that they support it, the better. We saw Ohio's probably the best example of this. You had the Ohio ballot question passed, and then you had legislators that were in effect saying that they were going to gut the law and make changes to it. But at the end of the day, none of them really had the political will to do that. And I think part of it is, how do you do that if 2/3 of the state, or 60% of the state, 65% of the state says we want this? You're taking a political risk yourself to do that. And I suspect if the ballot question passes, we're going to hear a lot about potential changes that they want to make. Whether or not they actually do them or not, it'll be a question of do they have the political courage to do
Yeah.
it?
Okay, I want to sort of focus on Insa because I think everything we just talked about is like steeped in uncertainty, right? Well, not so much Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Ohio, but certainly in Pennsylvania and in Florida, but the industry overall, because we didn't even touch on sort of federal issues that could impact or touch the business. But, like, how do you prepare a business like to operate successfully, operate profitably with so much uncertainty on the horizon? And the uncertainty is big, right? Could be a whole new market opened up in 2 states with, tens of millions of people, and something federally happens that could change the operations. Or is it like you just keep grinding knowing that things are going to change? When they do, you apply them? Or, like, how do you actually prep a company the size of Insa for that uncertainty?
I mean, you have to kind of keep grinding and be able to make assessments as best you can as you're getting in information. You know, I'll give you an example of something that's like a huge risk potentially for the industry, and less so for us because we don't have dispensaries built out yet in Pennsylvania. We have the ability to do them.
Mhm.
But one of the things that's been kicked around in Pennsylvania lately, and I think there's a draft in the House that has actually been filed and um, heard, is in and I'm just losing my train of thought on that
That's okay.
now. Um, we were talking about the state controlled liquor stores. So
Yeah, yeah.
so in Pennsylvania, that bill would allow essentially for any existing medical dispensary not to be able to convert to adult use. That's a huge business risk,
Hmm.
and that adult use cannabis could only be sold in the state liquor stores that Pennsylvania has. I don't know how you can calculate that business risk. Like, if you're an operator that's got 18 stores or 21 stores, how could you possibly survive that? And that's something you can't prepare for. So those are the type of things you deal with that come in and you try to gauge it. But something like that, that could kill your business.
Yeah,
And you almost have no control over it.
right.
So
It's
we're
like the whim of
constantly.
legislatures.
Yeah. So we're constantly having to kind of assess, like, get information, what's going on, what do we think could happen, what's the most likely scenario, and then how do we best prepare ourselves for that, so that we're constantly doing that in every state that we're in.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the
Well,
issues are
Steve,
different in every state.
Steve, I want to get your commitment that you'll come back to do a debrief on the election too, and then we'll talk about
Yeah.
the lame duck session of Congress and the president. We'll gauge all of those things sometime after November 5th. You'll come back.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoy talking about this stuff, so
I
it'd be good.
I I appreciate it a lot. That's it for today's Cultivated Daily. Thank you. Sorry, Cultivated Live. Steve, thank you so much for joining us here today. We'll connect with you as we talked about. Maybe in a couple weeks, we'll
Great.
debrief the whole thing. Good luck to you and the team in Florida. Thanks everybody for joining us here today on LinkedIn and YouTube. Follow us there. Get our newsletter at cultivated.news. Tomorrow we'll be back. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a Zoom with Kamala Harris and the cannabis community and what that means and who's going to be there. Thanks everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Bye.